Next, students, let us look at capacity levels. Again, very important for decision making. If we have huge capacity and do not produce enough, then it means we are incurring a lot of overhead, unnecessary overhead costs. There is the space, there is the power, there is depreciation, there is interest on the capital which is invested, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, if we have had a very small, we began with very little capacity because we did not have much of a demand. We may grow in a few years' time and then we don't have enough capacity to make, which means we lose a lot of customers, that we are not able to make use of the opportunities which come in the market. Yes or no? So deciding on a capacity level is important. As also we will understand how these capacity levels affect management decisions of understanding the cost of a product and therefore maybe pricing of a product. So let's begin, students. What is capacity level? Capacity refers to the ability of a machine or plant to produce. Correct? To produce what? To produce so many hours of work, to run for so many hours, or maybe to be able to produce so many number of units. So capacity is the ability of the machine to produce so many units or to work for so many hours, whichever way you express it. Now, capacity level may be of three types. One is the theoretical capacity, the practical capacity, and the normal capacity. We will understand first what is theoretical capacity, what is the definition, what is practical capacity, what is normal capacity, what may be the budgeted capacity. Okay, and then we will see how these capacity levels are used for management decisions. Okay. See, interestingly, they say one capacity level may be used for management decisions and another for external reporting. Theoretical capacity. The level of capacity that can be achieved under ideal conditions. That means there are no holidays, no machine breakdowns, no maintenance, no delays, no absenteeism, and no inefficiencies. This is also called ideal capacity or maximum capacity. However, it is not at all realistic. Yes or no, students? It's the maximum capacity which is possible. If you were going to work throughout without any interruption whatever, then it would be called a theoretical thing. That's why it's called an ideal capacity and therefore is not realistic. It's absolute maximum. Then you have practical capacity, which makes a little more sense, where you consider the unavoidable operating interruptions. You have Sundays holidays, yes or no? You have other holidays. You need some time to maintain the machine. There will be idle time. A worker cannot be working, if he has an 8-hour shift, it's not possible for him to be working for every minute of those 8 hours. Clear? So it is the maximum that a company can reasonably be expected to produce. Mind you, theoretical and practical capacity, they come from the supply side. Do not consider the demand of the customers. It is the supply from the side of the company, from the machine's point of view. The machine, the plant, whatever we are talking, what is their capacity? We have not so far ignored consumer demand. Let's just take an example to understand theoretical and practical capacity. Suppose a factory has a capacity of producing 50 units per hour with 3 shifts of 8 hours each. There are 52 Sundays and 13 other holidays in a year. Normal idle capacity is 1 hour per shift, and let us assume maintenance is done on Sundays. In that case, what is the theoretical capacity? Can I say the theoretical capacity is you are making 50 units per hour. So you work for 8 hours and you have 3 shifts. Correct? 50 units into 8 hours into 3 shifts. and you work for 365 days. In that case, you could say the theoretical capacity would be 438,000 units. On the other hand, what is the practical capacity now? You should be able to tell me practical capacity. You will ignore the Sundays, you will ignore other days. Then there is also idle capacity you have to remove. 1 hour per shift is idle capacity. Maintenance is done on Sunday, so we are not separately deducting, we are anyway deducting the 52 Sundays. So do you get something like this, students? You get 50 units which will be made in 7 hours of actual work. 1 hour is idle time. Yes or no? 1 hour per shift into 3 shifts. What about the days? You are talking of 365 days minus 52 Sundays, 13 other holidays. So your practical capacity is 315,000 units. This is 438,000 units. Clear? Now, let's also come to normal capacity. The capacity that will meet the average customer demand for a period of 3 years. Capacity that will meet the average customer demand for a period of 3 years is normal capacity. This factors in normal capacity, factors in seasonal and cyclical fluctuations. Yes or no? It's possible for some things that in winter there is a greater sale, summer there is less, certain months more, certain months less. So what does it do? When you are taking the average customer demand for 3 years, all these fluctuations are being considered. It considers demand, not what the plant can supply. See, this is from the consumer's point of view. This is more long-term tool than what is called master budget capacity, which master budget capacity, what I budget for. Budget is for a very short time, maybe for that month, maybe for 3 months or so on and so forth. The amount of output which is expected during that budgeted period, whether it's a month, whether it's 3 months, half yearly or a year. This is normally a shorter term definition as against the normal capacity. So clear, students, what are the types of capacity we are talking about? Theoretical capacity, the absolute maximum. Yes or no? Practical capacity is the maximum after considering certain unavoidable interruptions. That is what they should aspire to do. Normal capacity is you can base it on an average of 3-year customer demand. That is their normal capacity. That means that is what you have normally been manufacturing at. So usually practical capacity is lower than the theoretical capacity, and invariably the normal capacity is lower than the practical capacity. Budgeted capacity may be a very short term, for a very, very short term, for the period that the budget applies to. Capacity level and decision making. So what do these different levels of capacity have to do with taking of decisions? To understand that, let us first understand overhead allocation. You realize, students, before I mention, when you do overhead allocation, how do you do overhead allocation? Budgeted fixed cost divided by the estimated level of activity, right? Now, if you take theoretical capacity for this, then what happens? Theoretical capacity is very huge. If you're talking of 100,000 divided by 1,000 hours of theoretical capacity, you get 100. Practical capacity is bound to be less. If you take only say 500 hours, then it becomes half. Yes or no? Half is the hours, so the rate becomes double. 100,000 divided by 500 becomes 200. Yes or no? So theoretical capacity, if you use, the overhead absorption rate will be the lowest. Practical capacity will be higher. Normal capacity may still be higher. Just keep it in mind before we proceed. The thing is, this budgeted level of activity, when you say estimated level of activity, the question is whether to use theoretical, practical or normal capacity. So sometimes it's a estimated level, we say budgeted level of activity. If you were going to take the budgeted level of activity, I might have budgeted something for this month, a little different for the next month, and again another one in the third month. Maybe because of the seasonal fluctuations. Clear? So if I use this budgeted level of activity, what could happen is that this budgeted level of activity would change from period to period, and the fixed cost per unit will change. If I decide to absorb overheads in say the month of January, by considering what is estimated, what is budgeted, 525 for the month of Jan, 500 for Feb, and 475 for March. See, look at this. If fixed overheads are supposed to be 100,000 per month, but the budgeted level of activity for Jan, Feb, and March is 525, 500, and 475. This is budgeted level of activity, students. This is units, not dollar, okay, and 475 units respectively. Then what will be your fixed cost per unit in Jan is going to be 190.50. 100,000 by 525. If you take it per month, if you take separate for February, again this would be 100,000 divided by, it's not 5,000 but it is 500. Yes or no? That would be 200. And March, if you take 475, you get 210.50. Every month your cost is different. Overhead absorption is different. If overhead absorption is different, when you find out the cost of the product, every month it is different. You might have been producing as efficiently in Jan as in Feb as in March. The same rate of productivity applies, but the costing will be such, it will appear as if in January the fixed cost was the least. That's not the case. The cost of the product will fluctuate because of this fluctuating levels of activity. For fluctuating levels of activity in the 3 months. Do you understand? Therefore, that for budgeted level of activity, that is, if it's going to change, fluctuate so much from month to month, period to period, is hardly ever used for overhead absorption because there can be so much of variation from month to month to month. Clear? Let's look at theoretical capacity. So finding the cost of a product to set a price for a product, etc., the denominator plays a very critical role. If the denominator changes, the rate of absorption also changes. Now, let us take theoretical capacity. After all, theoretical capacity will be fixed. Correct? It is not going to change. You know the maximum capacity. It is not going to change based on customer demand or anything of the sort. Right? It's fixed. So suppose we take theoretical capacity, and suppose we take that your fixed overheads was how much? Was $100,000 is your fixed overheads. Same as last time is fixed overheads is 100,000, and the theoretical capacity is 1,000 units for that month. Then if we take theoretical capacity as a denominator, we get the fixed cost per unit as 100 per unit, and it will not change. The cost will remain the same. But we got 100 per unit. Now, this 100 per unit is really very low because this is a theoretical capacity of 100 units. We may make only 600 units, in which case the cost should have been much more. Yes or no? Practical capacity may be 700, maybe 800. Yes, but when we take this rate of 1,000 units, the advantage is that it will remain fixed throughout. Fixed for the cost is at least a certain fixed, because fixed overheads are after all fixed. Why should it fluctuate based on demand? Yes or no? So while that is an advantage, the problem is this is unreasonably low. After all, you know that this is never going to be achieved. This is not really practical. This cannot be. This is too idealistic and does not at all realistic. Cannot be achieved. Not possible. Correct? So the cost per unit will be very low, and if you go on the basis of this cost, the company may not recover its actual fixed cost if it is used to set prices, because utilization is not practically possible. Is this very clear, students? Followed, suppose I think this 100 is correct. Suppose I think raw material and all other costs are 500. I add this 100, it becomes 600, and based I want a 20% profit. I add 120 and I say 720. This may not really be right because I don't operate at 1000 units. I make only 500 units. My cost should not have been 100. So let me just say, if I take all other costs, say direct material and variable costs, other variable costs. Suppose I take them as 500. Then fixed overhead as computed above, I take 100. So I get total cost of 600. And suppose I say I want a 20% margin, margin, and I take 120, my pricing is 720. Is it clear? But if I look over a period of time, I have never made this 1000 units. I make only 500 units. Suppose I make only 500 units, then my rate of absorption will be double this. Yes or no? This is halved. 100,000 divided by 500 units will give me $200 per unit. Yes or no? Then what happens to my cost? This 500 remains the same. This is 200. Actually, my cost is 700. 700, yes or no? 700. If I had been selling in the market, for 720, I've really made a much lower profit than I would have liked to. There is no question of getting this 20% profit. If I do want 20% profit, then my price should have been 840 and not 720. So the management actually gets a very distorted picture of the costs. So theoretical capacity is never really used for absorbing of overheads. Let's look at practical capacity. Now this may be a better choice as estimated activity level or theoretical capacity. It's more realistic. And suppose, let us take that the practical capacity in the previous example is 750 units per month. If you taking practical capacity as a denominator, what do we get? We get the fixed cost per unit as 133. Fixed cost per unit as 133.33 per unit. So practical capacity is after all achievable, right? By using practical capacity as activity level, more realistic cost is arrived at. And if the company underutilizes its capacity, it should not be a reason to increase the cost of goods. You have the capacity, you are not using it. Why are you increasing your cost? Only because you are not using the capacity that you have. Do you understand? Is it clear, students? So far clear? Follow. Let's understand it with an example. Suppose the normal capacity in the previous example is 600 units per month. We get fixed cost as 166.67. So we did theoretical capacity of 1000 units. We did practical capacity of 750 units. Now we are also considering normal capacity. So what happens then? Total fixed cost are absorbed by the units manufactured. Now, here it is 166.67. Therefore, if you are making 600 units, this is how the cost is absorbed. If you take just one more example, I have taken normal capacity 166.67 and you will absorb 166.67 and 100,000 gets absorbed. This is fine. Suppose we use practical capacity. Fixed cost absorbed by units made, assuming 600 units are made, would only have been 80,000. Yes or no? Students, I hope I'm not rushing. Just see if you're clear. Suppose that the normal capacity, now I'm changing. So we did theoretical, we did practical. Now we are just trying to decide between practical and normal capacity. Just compare and see the difference. When you use normal capacity, assuming it's only 600 based on the average demand. Normally we have made only 600 units. So we could make 750. Yes or no? So now 600 units per month, when we divide, we get a rate of 166.67 per unit. Okay. Now what happens? So what is the cost absorbed? Assuming that you make 600 units in the next month also, you exactly absorb 100,000. No problem. Correct? But if you use practical capacity, remember what was the rate we had? We had a rate of only 133.33. Remember the previous example. So when we do this, we are absorbing only 80,000. But our fixed costs actually are 100,000. Yes or no? So what happens? What is that? That is the cost of unused capacity. It's thrown in your face. The managers know now that because they did not utilize their capacity, they are incurring an additional cost of 20,000. Don't change the cost of the product. Keep it separate as the cost of unused capacity. Make the managers aware of the capacity that is being underutilized. What do you want to do with this capacity now? Is it clear? There is a cost. If you're not using your capacity, there is a cost incurred. At least be aware of the use of the same. Follow, this is the greatest advantage of the practical capacity. So the use of practical capacity best reflects what the cost should be irrespective of the actual capacity utilization. It should be, you are able to make 750 units. So please compute the cost as with 750 units. That is what the cost should be. Just because you don't use, why should the customer pay for the higher cost? Yes or no? So the cost of the product does not include the cost of unused resources. That could vary. This month you make 500, next month you make 550, next month you make 450. It could change, and therefore the cost will also change. So it is better to use the practical capacity for pricing decisions since it is cost based. The customers will not pay, should not pay. For why should they be penalized? Because you are not utilizing your capacity. There's no value added as such, right? So there will be no fluctuations in the cost per unit, with fluctuations in product requirements of other products also, students. Yes or no? Sometimes what happens is we are making 3 or 4 products, right? When the product requirement of any one of them changes, we need not change the overhead cost for the other products. So such fluctuations can be eliminated by using practical capacity. Yet another benefit, students, is that makes the management more aware of the underutilization of the capacity. Yes or no? It's thrown in your face. $20,000 is the cost of your unused capacity. What are you going to do? You know the cost of every hour of unused capacity. You know it's going to cost $33.33 for every hour that I'm not using. Therefore, it may lead to other strategic decisions like, let's increase production. Let's look at other options. Shall we lease out this excess capacity? Should we make a new product? What can we do? This is after all a resource which we are not using and therefore incurring certain costs. Clear, students? So when this capacity levels are used for overhead allocation, they affect the cost of the product and subsequently they may affect the price of the product too. Yes or no? So being aware of the cost of unused resources makes the management more alert and it may lead to better decision making.